The massive cruise ship Celestial Dreams floated dead in space like a wounded whale. Its beautiful silver hull, which had once reflected starlight like a mirror, now had 3 giant holes torn through it. Inside the ship, 50,000 alien passengers from 12 different planets were starting to panic. Captain Vextal stood on his bridge, his blue-scaled hands shaking as he watched one warning light after another turn red on his control panels. The engines had exploded 20 minutes ago. The artificial gravity was flickering on and off, making passengers float and then crash back down. Worst of all, the air recycling systems were shutting down one by one. "Captain, oxygen levels are dropping fast," his first officer reported, her voice tight with fear. "We have maybe 18 hours before everyone starts suffocating." Vextal closed his 4 eyes for a moment. In his 30 years of commanding passenger ships, he had never faced anything this bad. The Celestial Dreams was supposed to be unsinkable, equipped with the best technology the galaxy had to offer. But now it was turning into a death trap. "Send out a distress signal," he ordered his communications officer. "Use every frequency we have. Make it as loud as possible." The young alien at the communication station nodded and began typing frantically. Within seconds, their desperate plea for help was racing through space at faster than light speed, reaching every civilized world within 100 light-years. The message was simple but terrifying. Engine failure. Hull breach. Life support dying. 50,000 souls about to die unless someone could save them. But there was one big problem. The Celestial Dreams had been traveling near a solar system that made every alien in the galaxy nervous. The Sol System. The home of Earth. Earth was listed in every galactic database as a Class 9 quarantine world. That was the highest danger rating possible. The planet was considered so violent and hostile that most aliens believed nothing civilized could possibly live there. The creatures that called Earth home were known throughout the galaxy as Deathworlders, beings so savage and dangerous that they were best avoided completely. When the distress signal reached the Galactic Council headquarters on the peaceful world of New Haven, the emergency session that followed was unlike anything in their history. Representatives from dozens of worlds gathered in their great crystal chamber, all talking at once. 50,000 lives, said Council member Zeltar, his tentacles waving with worry. "We cannot just let them die." "But look where they are," replied another council member, pointing at the star map. "Right next to that horrible death world. Any rescue ship we send might not come back." The debate went on for hours while precious time slipped away. Every civilized race in the galaxy knew the stories about Earth. They said it was a world covered in deadly poison water that fell from the sky. The surface was supposedly torn apart by massive earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Wild beasts roamed freely, and the dominant species, humans, were known to be incredibly violent. According to galactic intelligence reports, humans spent most of their time fighting wars against each other. They lived on a planet that was constantly trying to kill them, and somehow this had made them into some of the most dangerous creatures in the known universe. Most aliens believed that humans were probably cannibals who enjoyed violence and destruction. "Even if we wanted to help," said Admiral Corthan, "our nearest rescue fleet is 3 star systems away. It would take them at least 2 weeks to get there, and that's if they pushed their engines to the breaking point." The math was simple and horrible. The Celestial Dreams would become a floating graveyard long before any help could arrive. As the council members argued back and forth, none of them noticed something important happening in the deep space monitoring stations. The human governments on Earth had also picked up the distress signal. And while the aliens debated what to do, the humans were already taking action. Nobody in the galaxy expected the Deathworlders to even care about alien lives, let alone try to help save them. Lieutenant Zyexpo was staring at his sensor screen when something impossible happened. A small blip appeared on his display, then another, then several more. His 4 eyes blinked rapidly as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing. "Captain," he called out, his voice shaking. "I'm picking up ships approaching our position. Multiple contacts, bearing 27 Mark IV. Captain Vextal rushed over to the sensor station, his scaled feet clicking on the metal floor. That's impossible. The nearest Council rescue fleet is still days away. Sir, I'm reading 17 separate vessels now. They're human ships. The bridge fell completely silent. Every alien crew member stopped what they were doing and stared at the main view screen. There, hanging in the darkness of space like metal predators, were ships unlike anything they had ever seen. These weren't the sleek, curved vessels that civilized species built. These human ships looked rough and angular, like they had been hammered together in some primitive factory. They had sharp edges, exposed weapons, and hull plating that looked thick enough to stop a meteor. By galactic standards, they shouldn't even be able to fly, let alone travel between stars. How did they get here so fast? Whispered the first officer. We only sent our distress call 6 hours ago. Captain Vextal had no answer. The nearest human colony was supposed to be weeks away, even at maximum speed. Yet here they were, 17 warships surrounding the dying cruise liner like they had been waiting nearby all along. The communication system crackled to life with a voice speaking in heavily accented galactic standard. Disabled vessel, this is Commander Riley Chen of the Human Rescue Fleet. We received your distress call. Permission to come aboard and render assistance. Vextal's hands were shaking as he reached for the communication controls. Everything he had ever been told about humans suggested this was some kind of trap. Deathworlders didn't help other species, they conquered them or ate them. Human vessel, he replied carefully, we accept your offer of assistance. Within minutes, small shuttles began launching from the human ships. The aliens watched in amazement as these tiny craft moved through the dangerous debris field around their ship like they were dancing. Human pilots were navigating obstacles that should have destroyed their vessels, flying through gaps that seemed impossibly narrow. The first shuttle docked at the main airlock with a loud clang that echoed through the ship. Captain Vextal and his security team waited nervously as the airlock cycled through its opening sequence. They had no idea what these legendary Deathworlders would look like up close. The airlock door slid open with a hiss, and out stepped a human female wearing what looked like the most basic environmental suit the aliens had ever seen. Her equipment was bulky and primitive, held together with what appeared to be metal tape and spare parts. By comparison, even the cheapest galactic suits were works of art. Hello there, the human said, pulling off her helmet to reveal short brown hair and bright green eyes. I'm Commander Kate Miller. We're here to help get you folks out of this mess. She was smaller than most aliens had expected, maybe 5.5 feet tall, but there was something about the way she moved that made everyone step back instinctively. Her eyes were constantly scanning the corridor, taking in every detail, like a predator evaluating its surroundings. Behind her came more humans, each carrying equipment that looked like it had been built in someone's garage. They had welding torches, medical kits, portable computers, and tools that no civilized species had used in centuries. Yet these primitive-looking devices seemed to work perfectly in their hands. Ma'am, said Captain Vextal, trying to keep his voice steady, our ship is dying. The hull breaches are too large to repair, and our life support systems are failing. Kate Miller looked at him and smiled. It was not a cruel smile, but it showed teeth that reminded everyone present that humans were descended from predators. Captain, my people have been fixing impossible problems for thousands of years. Today's just another Tuesday for us. She turned to her team and began giving orders in rapid-fire English. The humans spread out through the ship like they owned the place, moving into areas that were so dangerous that the alien crew wouldn't even go near them. The temperature in the damaged sections was cold enough to freeze most species solid within minutes. The atmosphere was a toxic mix of leaked chemicals and radiation that should have killed anything that breathed it. Yet the humans walked through these death zones like they were strolling through a park. Captain Vextal followed Kate Miller through the ship, watching in disbelief as her team began working miracles. They sealed hull breaches by welding metal plates directly onto the ship's exterior while floating in the vacuum of space. They repaired life support systems while breathing air so contaminated it would have poisoned any other species. One human engineer was actually working inside a flooded compartment, holding his breath for what seemed like impossible amounts of time while fixing critical systems underwater. Another was rewiring power systems while electricity sparked and crackled around his hands like he was immune to electrocution. How are they doing this? Vextal asked his first officer quietly. I don't know, sir. By all known science, they should be dead. But the humans just kept working, turning the impossible into routine with nothing more than determination and primitive tools. Dr. Tom Richardson wiped the sweat from his forehead as he looked around the medical bay of the human hospital ship Mercy. In his 20 years working emergency medicine in the roughest hospitals on Earth, he thought he had seen everything. Gang shootings, industrial accidents, people who had survived falls that should have killed them, but this was completely different. The medical bay was packed wall to wall with alien patients, and every single one of them was dying from things he had only read about in textbooks. There were beings with blue blood that had turned purple, creatures with multiple hearts that had all stopped beating, and others whose bodies were shutting down from exposure to their own ship's toxic atmosphere. Dr. Richardson, called out Nurse Ashley Brooks from across the room. The reptile guy in bed 3 is getting worse. His skin is turning gray and his breathing is getting really shallow. Tom rushed over to examine the patient. It was a Zellan, a species that looked like a 7-foot-tall lizard walking upright. Normally, their scales were a beautiful emerald green, but this one's entire body had turned a sickly gray color that reminded Tom of old concrete. The medical scanner attached to the alien's arm was beeping frantically, showing readings that made no sense by human standards. The creature had 3 hearts, and 2 of them had completely stopped working. Its blood pressure was dropping fast, and according to the readout, its entire nervous system was shutting down. What happened to him? Tom asked one of the alien doctors who had been rescued along with the passengers. The alien physician, a tall being with tentacles instead of arms, looked hopeless. Chemical poisoning from the hull breach. When our atmosphere mixed with the vacuum of space, it created toxic compounds. His body cannot process them. He will die within the hour. Tom stared at the dying Zellan and felt that familiar feeling he got in emergency rooms back on Earth, the moment when conventional medicine wasn't enough and you had to try something crazy or watch someone die. Ashley, he called to his nurse, prep a plasma transfusion kit. Ashley looked at him like he had lost his mind. Sir, you want to give human blood to an alien? That's impossible. Our blood types aren't even close to compatible. Maybe not, Tom said, connecting the transfusion line, but this guy is dying anyway. Sometimes in medicine, you have to try the impossible because the possible isn't working. The alien doctor with tentacles made a sound that might have been laughter or horror. Human, your primitive medicine cannot help. Our species have completely different biological systems. Tom ignored the comment and began the transfusion. Human plasma, the clear liquid part of blood, began flowing into the Zellan's system through and 4 line. Everyone in the medical bay stopped what they were doing to watch, expecting the alien to die even faster. Instead, something amazing happened. Within 5 minutes, patches of green began appearing on the Zellan's gray scales. His breathing became stronger and more regular. 2 of his 3 hearts started beating again, and the medical scanner began showing improved readings across the board. That's impossible, whispered the tentacled alien doctor. How is your blood healing him? Tom was just as surprised as everyone else, but he tried to sound confident. Human blood plasma contains hundreds of different proteins and compounds. Living on Earth means our bodies have learned to fight off every kind of poison, infection, and toxin you can imagine. Word of the miracle spread through the medical bay like wildfire. Other human doctors began trying plasma transfusions on different alien species, and the results were consistently amazing. A bird-like creature whose lungs had been damaged by toxic gas began breathing normally after receiving human plasma. A rock-like being whose internal organs were failing started showing signs of recovery. Dr. Lisa Chong, working on a patient with multiple broken bones, discovered something even more incredible. Tom, come look at this. I gave this patient a small injection of human adrenaline to restart his heart, and now his bones are healing themselves. Tom examined the X-rays and couldn't believe what he was seeing. The alien's broken bones were literally knitting themselves back together, healing weeks' worth of damage in just hours. Nurse Brett Williams made another discovery by accident. He had been treating an infected wound on an alien patient and accidentally got some of his own saliva on the injury. Within minutes, the infection that had been resistant to every galactic antibiotic began clearing up. "Doctor," Brett called out excitedly, "I think human saliva has antibiotic properties that work on alien infections." As the hours passed, the human medical team made discovery after discovery. Human tears contained compounds that could cure certain types of alien blindness. The natural bacteria that lived in human stomachs could break down toxins that were deadly to other species. Even human sweat seemed to have healing properties for beings from desert worlds. The aliens in the medical bay began to understand something that shocked them to their core. Earth wasn't just a dangerous death world that had created violent monsters. It was a planet so hostile and filled with dangers that its dominant species had evolved into living medical miracles. Every disease, every poison, every toxin that Earth had thrown at humans for millions of years had made them into beings whose very blood could heal other species. Their bodies were like walking pharmacies, producing natural medicines that the galaxy's most advanced civilizations couldn't create in their laboratories. Dr. Richardson looked around at all the alien patients who were now recovering, their gray skin returning to normal colors, their breathing steady and strong. "You know what's funny?" he said to Ashley. "The galaxy thinks we're dangerous because we come from a death world. They have no idea that our world made us into the ultimate healers." The tentacled alien doctor approached Tom with something that might have been respect in his large eyes. "Human doctor, I have studied medicine for 40 of your years. I have never seen anything like this. Your species, you are not the monsters we believed you to be." Tom smiled and went back to work, saving lives with nothing more than the blood running through his veins. Commander Mike Stevens stood on the bridge of his old cargo ship Iron Horse, watching his crew work like their lives depended on it. The ship had been hauling mining equipment between Earth and the asteroid belt for 15 years, but now they were trying to turn it into something it was never designed to be, a passenger rescue vessel. "Chief, how many people can we actually fit in here?" Mike asked his engineer, Lisa Parker, who was covered in grease and had been working non-stop for the past 6 hours. Lisa wiped her hands on a dirty rag and looked at the numbers she had scribbled on the back of an old food packet. "If we strip out all the cargo containers and install these emergency life support pods, maybe 200 aliens. That's if we pack them in like sardines and nobody complains about comfort." Mike looked out at the dying cruise ship through his bridge window. 50,000 passengers were trapped over there, and his ship could only save 200. The math was brutal and depressing. But then he remembered something his grandfather had told him years ago. His grandfather had been a rescue worker during the great earthquakes back on Earth, and he always said the same thing: you don't save everyone by giving up. You save everyone by making sure nobody gets left behind. Mike opened the communication channel that connected him to every human ship in the area. His voice echoed through 17 different vessels, from military cruisers to tiny private shuttles. "This is Commander Stevens to all human vessels. I want to make something very clear. We are not leaving a single alien on that ship. I don't care if we have to strap them to the outside of our hulls and share our own breathing masks. Every single soul on the Celestial Dreams goes home alive. That's not a suggestion, that's an order." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, what started as a small rescue mission turned into the largest emergency operation in human history. From Earth's oceans came fishing boats that had been retrofitted with atmospheric processors normally used for underwater work. Captain Roy Chen, who had been catching tuna just 2 days ago, was now flying through space in his converted fishing vessel, ready to carry alien refugees to safety. The asteroid mining stations emptied out as every available ship joined the rescue fleet. These were tough, practical vessels built to survive in the harshest environments imaginable, and their crews were used to working in conditions that would kill most people. Even private citizens got involved. Jake Thompson, who owned a small family transport that he used for short cargo runs, piloted his ship through dangerous debris fields to reach passengers trapped in the lower decks of the cruise liner. His ship wasn't designed for rescue work, but Jake had grown up fixing engines with his father, and he knew how to make any machine do things it wasn't supposed to do. Beth Mitchell, a construction worker from Mars Colony, hadn't slept in 48 hours. She was welding emergency airlocks onto ships that had never been designed to carry passengers, creating makeshift rescue compartments out of cargo containers and spare parts. Her hands were blistered from the welding torch, but she kept working because people were counting on her. In one of the most dangerous parts of the operation, 19-year-old Danny Wilson was flying supply runs between the rescue ships. He had just gotten his pilot's license 3 months ago, but he was navigating through floating debris and twisted metal like he had been doing it his whole life. His mother, Carol, was coordinating medical supplies from the command ship, making sure every rescue vessel had enough medicine and life support equipment. The coordination required was incredible. Humans were sharing everything they had: food, water, medicine, even their own breathing equipment when necessary. Military ships gave up their weapons storage to make room for more passengers. Luxury yachts owned by wealthy families were converted into emergency medical facilities. What amazed the aliens most was that the humans never asked for anything in return. No payment, no political favors, no promises of future trade deals. They just worked around the clock because people needed help. Captain Vextal watched from the bridge of the Celestial Dreams as human ships surrounded his vessel like a protective fleet. Some of these ships were so small they looked like toys compared to his massive cruise liner, but their crews were performing miracles of engineering and logistics. "Sir," his first officer reported, "the humans are saying they can evacuate all 50,000 passengers within 18 hours. "That's impossible," Vextal whispered. "We have 12 different species with completely different atmospheric and temperature requirements." But the humans were already solving those problems. They were creating separate environmental zones within their ships, jury-rigging life support systems to handle different types of alien biology, and even sharing their own food supplies with species that could digest human cuisine. The most incredible part was watching teenage human pilots flying through debris fields that would challenge veteran spacers, while their parents coordinated rescue operations from improvised command centers. Entire families were working together to save complete strangers from across the galaxy. As the evacuation continued through the night, one thing became crystal clear to every alien being rescued. These weren't the savage Deathworlders they had been taught to fear. These were people who would risk everything to help others, even if those others were complete strangers from different worlds. The rescue footage spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Every major news network, from the crystal cities of Altair to the floating platforms of Kepler 442, was broadcasting the same incredible story. 50,000 alien lives had been saved by the species that everyone had spent centuries avoiding and fearing. The videos were impossible to ignore or explain away. There was Commander Kate Miller, a human female, taking off her own breathing mask to give it to a suffocating alien child while she held her breath in a toxic atmosphere. The footage showed human engineers carrying injured beings 3 times their size through collapsing corridors, their primitive-looking equipment somehow working better than the galaxy's most advanced technology. Most shocking of all were the images of humans working together with a coordination that defied everything the galaxy thought it knew about Deathworlders. These weren't savage monsters fighting each other for scraps. These were organized, compassionate beings who had turned an impossible rescue into a perfectly executed operation. On the news channel Galactic Prime, veteran reporter Zilnek struggled to find words as he showed footage of teenage human pilots navigating deadly debris fields to save alien passengers. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all classifications," he said, his usual professional composure cracking, "we have been wrong about humanity for over 200 years. The political implications were enormous. Ambassador Chindar of the Rillan Confederacy, whose own brother had been aboard the Celestial Dreams, stood before the Galactic Council in their great crystal chamber. His usually perfect diplomatic composure was completely gone, replaced by raw emotion that shocked everyone present. Council members, Chandar began, his voice shaking, I have spent my entire career studying the species we call Deathworlders. I have read every intelligence report, every analysis, every warning about the dangers of human contact. And I stand before you today to tell you that we have been completely, utterly wrong. He activated the holographic display in the center of the chamber, showing footage of Dr. Tom Richardson using his own blood to save alien lives. These humans, these supposed violent primitives, they saved my brother's life. Do you know what they asked for in return? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. They didn't want money, territory, trade agreements, or political favors. They helped because help was needed. The chamber fell silent as more footage played. Human families sharing their own food with alien refugees. Construction workers welding emergency repairs while floating in the vacuum of space. Teenagers risking their lives to carry medicine between ships. Council member Corthan, who had been one of the strongest advocates for keeping Earth under quarantine, slowly stood up. Ambassador Chandar, are you suggesting we completely revise our assessment of human civilization? I'm not suggesting it, Chandar replied firmly. I'm demanding it. We labeled them as monsters based on fear and ignorance. Meanwhile, they have become the most capable rescue specialists in the galaxy. Within days of Chandar's speech, something unprecedented happened. Diplomatic channels that had been sealed shut for decades suddenly began opening. The Andromedian Trade Federation, which had refused to even acknowledge that humans existed, sent a formal request for a meeting. The Advanced Medical Consortium, representing the galaxy's top physicians, petitioned for immediate collaboration with human doctors. Even more shocking was the message that arrived from the hegemony of Pure Worlds, a group so xenophobic that they rarely communicated with other species, let alone Deathworlders. Their formal message of gratitude was brief but historic. The hegemony acknowledges the debt owed to humanity for their selfless actions in preserving galactic life. The scientific community was in chaos as researchers tried to understand how they had gotten everything so wrong. Dr. Veltar, the galaxy's leading expert on Deathworld species, published a complete retraction of his life's work. We studied Earth as a hostile environment, he wrote, but we failed to understand that hostile environments don't always create hostile species. Sometimes they create heroes. Captain Vextal, now fully recovered and back on active duty, was called to give his final report to the Council. His testimony would go down in galactic history as one of the most important speeches ever delivered in that chamber. Honorable Council members, he began, I was the captain of the Celestial Dreams. I watched my ship die and my passengers face certain death. I was prepared to record final messages for 50,000 families across 12 worlds. He paused and looked directly at each council member. But we did not encounter monsters in the Sol system. We found the galaxy's greatest potential allies. These humans were forged by a world that taught them not just how to survive impossible odds, but how to help others survive them too. The transformation in galactic opinion was swift and complete. Overnight, humans went from being the species to avoid at all costs to being the species you called when everything else had failed. When natural disasters struck alien worlds, the first calls for help went to Earth. When mining accidents trapped workers in impossible conditions, human rescue teams were requested by name. The Galactic Emergency Response Network, which had operated for centuries without human involvement, formally invited Earth to join as a founding member. The invitation was accepted within hours, and human rescue protocols became the new galactic standard. Trade routes that had avoided the Sol system for generations were redesigned to pass through human space. Not because humans demanded it, but because other species wanted the security of knowing that help was nearby if something went wrong. The final change came 6 months after the rescue, when the Galactic Council voted unanimously to lift Earth's quarantine status. The official statement was simple but powerful: humanity has proven beyond doubt that they represent hope, not danger, to galactic civilization. Earth was no longer the forbidden death world to be feared and avoided. It had become the place the galaxy turned to when hope seemed lost and the impossible needed to become possible.